there's just a significant transition that we've been going through over about 5 years, right? So financially, right, what does it mean to be a system that used to have a lot more resources than it does now? That's a transition you go through. The demographic transition has been significant. We all know that. The transition in what academic success means, right, is a significant one. And there's been a leadership transition, right? I mean, there's been a leadership transition in the superintendent's seat. And that, to me, as I think about trying to figure out what went wrong or what is wrong or what to, more importantly, how to solve the problem, I always try to look at the context. And I think, and I'm sure you all can add to those contextual factors that I've identified, but as I'm thinking about what's the problem we're trying to solve, I have to think about the context. So that then led me to the history. And I'll go back to 2000. There was a PDK math audit, right, that led to the board adopting some new curriculum policy. A new curriculum was implemented in 2002 and 2003. In 2005, 2006, an expectation was communicated directly to principals that 80% of students should be in Algebra 1 by grade 8. Access for all students was stressed, given disparities in representation of minority students in higher level courses. Equity, give kids an opportunity. That's a critical part of an equity agenda. Give kids an opportunity. In 2006, the OSA report on semester exam grades was done, right? So we have reported, we've looked at the issue before around semester exam grades, and the data, quite frankly, aren't that different from what we're seeing currently. And in 2007, curriculum revisions started. A math work group was convened in 2009, and at that time, for the 2009-2010 year, I've been told the deputy superintendent and the chief school performance officers communicated the expectation of principals that students should not be placed in courses just to meet targets. Degree of preparation should be a strong factor in course placement. And then in the spring of 2009, the 7 keys were launched, which explicitly said, set a high bar. 2009, 2010, Common Core were adopted in Maryland. And then 2010, the Math Implementation Team Steering Committee was established, and it's met fits and starts. So you can, if you sort of look at that roller coaster, almost, and one thing that's so important in school improvement work and district improvement work is focus. And as I'm constructing that timeline, I can see what the agenda was in the early 2000s, and then I can see how perhaps some messages got mixed, or some perhaps things weren't as clear as they should have been, as well as new standards coming in. Common Core changed everything. You get the math work group, you get all these different things happening all during that time. And
Can I just add to your historical piece?
Sure.
Since I've been around for all of this, there were also a couple of other factors that, as we looked at those early years, we found grading, a wide variation of grading among the schools and within buildings. And so the board revised the grading and reporting policy after a lot of work. And the other piece was that looming on the horizon were our high school assessments that were going to become requirements for graduation. And originally, there were going to be 10. And geometry, in addition to algebra, there was going to be geometry. And there was a belief that if kids couldn't pass our local end of course exams, they weren't going to be able to pass those high school assessments. And so all of that also figured into this.
Absolutely, and as I said, this is just sort of what I've been able to piece together as I'm thinking about, take me back to my history. Absolutely, there's so many other factors. And then from 2009 to 2013, $15 million cut from our professional development budget. So just as we're asking people to do new things to address new standards, as well as to help support those kids who need support, money was cut for professional development, right? So how do you get your head around it? Right, that's the challenge I think we have going forward. How do you, it is what it is in some ways, and there's many different explanations that people could provide for, and people. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is the desire to pounce on different pieces of data, right? And data in isolation is completely useless. But we will find, and there are FOI requests, and people want to pounce on different pieces of data, say this is the problem or whatever it may be, and I don't find that to be a useful exercise. I as you know, to get my head around things, I like to ask questions, and at best the data help you ask better questions, right? So these are some of the questions that I think we have to start asking, and then I'll tell you about how we're going to go about it. And again, this is just my list of stuff based on lots of conversation we've had internally. There may be other questions that we're going to want to ask, and some of them are very straightforward, and some of them are a little more complex. So what's the trend over 5 years, right? Let's look at trend data at the district level and at the school level to say what are the trends. Or let's understand what our mathematics achievement has looked like. And I would also say not only with the exams, but also with course completion, because that's been the target, has been course completion. So let's look at both those. Why have some students in some schools, or I should say, have some students in some schools been more successful than others? Why? Right, so again, look at that, see, are there some places where kids are doing very well on the exams and on course completion, which is our target, and why is that? You got to go and talk to people, got to find out what's going on. Are the curriculum and the assessments tightly aligned? Right? We believe that there is very good alignment, but let's take a look. What has been the most effective professional development, and what should the professional development plan be going forward? Right? And that's both on two pieces here: great first instruction and appropriate supports where needed. What's the difference between course completion versus exam grades, and why is there a large difference? Is it a policy issue? Right? Again, it goes back to this question around grading and reporting and how kids can look at it and make determinations. Why do we see these gaps? How have accelerated students versus non-accelerated students fared both on exams and in course completion? And maybe we can even go further. Who's been accelerated and how have they done? You can probably break that down in a couple other ways as well. I also wonder how deeply engaged we are with our people around some of these issues. And this is more of a cultural question I have about the organization. As we have so many different mechanisms for collaboration, and I wonder if those enable us to get to some of the deep issues or questions, concerns, ideas that folks in the field have about some of this work, right? So how do we, I think we have to really hear the student voice in here. What do our students say about this? Like we really got to talk to them. And what do our teachers and our leaders have to say about this? What's their take on it? And this goes back to the engagement question. All right, so we have all these processes, and they're good processes where we collaborate, but sometimes, as Peter Block says, you want to have a knee-to-knee conversation with people and just understand what's happening. So we've got to take a look there. And then finally, again, have we missed something? Or what do outside experts have to say about our approach? There are people out there that do this for a living. We have fabulous people here, but maybe we've missed something. And maybe there's something in our strategy, both going forward and supporting, that needs to be addressed. So let me tell you specifically what we're doing. First, I am very, very confident in our strategy going forward. Right? And by that, I mean Curriculum 2.0. It's solid work, and we're already hearing from teachers about the the skills that the kids have, the concepts they have, their understanding. I'm very confident in Curriculum 2.0. I'm very confident in the integrated team support work that we briefly described today and talked about a month ago in terms of interventions. I think that is absolutely the right way to go. The innovation schools that we've been talking about, the new algebra curriculum, the money we've put in the budget for staff development or for additional staff and professional development, very confident in all those system-wide efforts. But let's go back to the dual operating system idea, right? While we improve the system, we also have to intervene, right? So this is what we're going to do. There are going to be two groups going forward. One is simply a reconvening of the math work group implementation team. That's a team that came out of the math work group, and it's not quite clear what they did or how often they met or what they did. But I believe that there's a need for a regular oversight and review K-12 of the sort of systemic math work, right? So a group of people who represent, the district, helping us think through what's actually happening, looking at the data, looking at the sort of system level to say, here's what's going on, right? That will provide reports to me on a regular basis. And then the second piece, so that's Eric Lang's work, right? And then the second piece is I've asked Chris Guerin and Daryl Williams to immediately convene leaders and teachers, to figure out what's going to be different September 1, right? For the kids who are sitting in our system that have gaps in their knowledge and skills and need to do well on whatever aspect of our mathematics program that's before them, whether it's the day-to-day coursework, whether it is the exams, or whether it is the final course grade. So the charge there is to work with each school, and just so you know the way I think about it, it goes back to the innovation school thing. We can't wait for all the systemic issues to be solved, right? And I put quotation marks around solved because it's never solved. It's always continuous improvement. And I cannot allow for there to be an individual child sitting in any of our classrooms not getting what they need to improve their capacity to do high level, and in fact, what's going to be a higher level of mathematics, because with the new college career ready bill, 24, if you enter in, I think it's the 2013-14 school year, you have to graduate with Algebra 2. Right? Now, I know there's still, all that still has to be worked out, but those standards are changing, and if, so that's my other mantra around using data is use data to name names. So that's the idea of going through every single child in your school and saying this is what we're going to do differently to provide supports. And if there's money that we need to put towards it for whatever, then we're going to have to figure that out. So I've charged Chris and Daryl to work with the schools so that there's a September 1, this is what's going to look like. And that's a school by school basis, because you don't know the number at each school, you don't know what's happening. It could be, I mean, there's so many different ways to slice and dice that piece that, I don't want to say it's just one thing. So that's how we're going to approach it going forward. I do know that, again, there are people that want to assign the cause, or that are looking at one, and this is part of the frustrating aspect of it, and I'll stop on this because I'm sure there are comments and questions. One piece of real data was put out, and it's real data. It speaks to conditions in our schools, and it then gets seized upon and by those who want to think there's only one part of the problem or don't understand all of the different pieces of it. And this is not an excuse making at all. This is just, it can be frustrating sometimes when only one piece gets out. I do have to say that it has triggered for us some positive self-examination about what we're doing, right? And we should always strive to be as transparent about our results. But I also want people I would encourage people to strive to understand the kind of systemic aspects of this. There's not one reason, right? There's not one cause, nor is there one solution. And there are many, there's just so many different factors that go in. So I think between the work that Eric will do on the overall systemic pieces, the continued work that we will do as we've described, and then the immediate action work that Daryl and Chris will oversee with our school leaders and our teachers, I think that we will be in a different place for the start of the next school year. Let me stop there and see what questions. I'm sure that answers everybody's question. There's no comments. All right.